Good evening. Welcome to the Wednesday, January 20th meeting of the Carson City Airport Authority. I'm going to call this meeting to order, request a roll call and determination of a quorum.
Chairperson Golden.
Here.
Vice Chair Pulitz.
Present.
Treasurer Rogers.
Here.
Member Jones.
Here.
Member Hamilton.
Here.
Member Hutter. Member Norvell.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Thank you so much, Danielle. Yes, sir.
You say January.
Did I say? It's, God forbid. It's July 20th. Thank you, Stan. On that note, Stan, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, if we could start the meeting by approving the minutes of our last Airport Authority meeting, one for the record books because it was so brief. If anyone would mind entertaining them, if we could get someone to give a motion in a second, we can get that going in the right direction. Okay. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the draft minutes from our last regular meeting of June 15th, 2022. Harlow, just a matter of circumstance here, you were absent from the last meeting, as I recall. So, okay, fair enough. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And any abstentions? Okay, thank you. Modification of the agenda. The chairman reserves the right to modify the agenda in order to most effectively process items. Items may be taken out of order, combined for consideration, or pulled or removed from the agenda at any time. We're going to do a couple things out of order. Well, one out of order and one is being removed from the agenda. The treasurer's report is going to be below item E. So we're going to hear the treasurer's report before we do anything else. For good purpose, it needs to preface a lot of the things that we're doing. And item number 2 in public hearings will be removed from this evening's agenda. So with that, public comment. Members of the public who wish to address the Airport Authority may speak on an agendized or non-agendized matter related to the airport. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person or topic, and if your item requires extended discussion, please request the same of me to calendar the matter for a future Airport Authority meeting. Any members of the public care to opine on any matters? Okay, fair enough. We'll close public comment. With that, Mr. Rogers, can we get you to give us your report this evening?
No problem. So we've just completed our fiscal year. The year-end reports are in the packet. They're a little junkier than I would like them to be because it was kind of a unique year. There was several variations to our budget that happened during the course of the year. And for example, we weren't able to spend some of our capital project money last year because we couldn't get anybody to ship us things like the snowplow. We intended to buy that last year. We weren't able to do so. And we also spent a good chunk of money in June on the AWAS relocation, and we will not get reimbursed for that in last fiscal year. That'll happen this fiscal year. So that makes the reports come out less clean than I would hope them to be. Then we also got a unique income last year from the the two COVID grants that we got, that totaled $81,000 in income, with no specific associated expenses, although we did have additional cleaning expenses, and we spent money to make the airport COVID safe, and we were compensated for that. So I think that the best way for me to summarize the results, at least the preliminary results, is that our revenues for the year were 2% over budget, which in a year that was as exciting as this last year has been is a good result.
Over budget is over budget.
Yeah. Unfortunately, with the after you remove the impact of the AWAS relocation project, our expenses, we were over budget by 22%. That's not good, and that was not driven by labor costs, and they came in under budget. And so I don't really want to focus on all the different line items, but I do want to identify one particular area where we were dramatically over budget, and this drove most of our over budget conditions, and that's for professional services. We were $20,000 over budget for the year on our accounting-related services. And that was driven primarily by the fact that we did not budget for the fact that we were going to have to do what they call a single audit. If you spend a certain amount of federal government money, you have to do an additional auditing process. And on top, so we had additional costs for that. And on top of that, the rules relative to accounting for state agencies had changed prior to last year, and the number of accountants who were willing to do auditing services for state agencies last year was dramatically reduced, and so the prices went up dramatically. And the second place where we dramatically overspent our budget is we were $38,000 over budget for legal services last year. I want to drill down on that for the group, just for reference. And I want to start by saying the legal representation that we are getting is appropriate, and I think is appropriately priced. I'm not complaining about the legal services, our contracting for legal services. Oh, let me back up. On the auditing services, we did choose a new auditor for this year. We started shopping based on the fact that that it was tough to find, price competitive services for auditing, and we did switch auditors, and we just signed off on the engagement letter for our new auditor. So that will be happening over the course of the next couple of months. All right, so now back to legal services. There was 3 efforts, I would say, put forth last year that were not budgeted for in terms of our requirements for legal services, that were not budgeted for and were expensive. I would say we're outside of the normal scope of operations for the airport. And so here they are. We reviewed a series of proposals for land leasing from one of our tenants during the course of the year, and none of those proposals came to fruition. We ended up generating no additional revenue for the airport, and we expended quite a bit of effort reviewing proposals that either were not suitable for, between the time when they were presented to us and they were presented to our lawyer and when they could have come to fruition, didn't come to fruition.
Could you embellish us on the cost for that one item?
Total for the year, $23,800. Okay, so that's half of our legal budget for the year. And then there was a second issue that we dealt with during the year that was a ethics complaint. And that of course generated no additional revenue for us. And we expended $7,700 on that circumstance and legal costs. And then the third one was a request for special consideration from one of our tenants as ownership changed on their lease. And that did result in additional revenue for the airport. But it did cost us $9,500 to process the request for special consideration. So between all those items, we spent 41,000, just over $41,000 on items that I would say I wouldn't call, the course of normal operation of an airport.
So if we backed those three items out, we would have been below budget on our legal.
Yes.
Let me state for the record, too, if you don't mind, make a point on this. Our legal representation is exemplary in nature. I keep my correspondence with our legal counsel to a minimum because I know it runs the meter up. But that said, we're getting a very lucrative, or I should say very attractive rate from our legal counsel, who has done just a fantastic job over the years. I think the problem here is we need to have a means of cost recovery on something like a prospective tenant that comes in and runs up our legal bills, because it's not internally driven. It's externally driven.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you, Michael. And I think that we don't want to train prospective tenants that we're their legal counsel. Our job is to review and approve or disapprove complete applications for anything. And so it also, and so when we get applications that are not complete, require us to spend a lot of time making corrections or making sure that all of the requirements are properly covered. It costs money, which I've delineated, but it also puts our manager in a truly lousy position, where he has to be an advocate for new tenants, and yet they bring forth, or for new or existing tenants, and yet they bring forth items that are incomplete or are casually prepared, I would say.
Stan? Well, we'll get to that later, and hold on a second though. I want to be very clear too, and I know this occurs, and it's very wrong. Our legal counsel does a great job. He's very accessible. I understood, but what happens is oftentimes we have people who don't like what they hear from our manager or from the airport authority, and then they bypass that chain of command and go right to legal counsel. I mean, I'm sure Steve can concur with that. And I want to make it very clear, Steve, I am not demeaning you or your services in any way, shape, or form. To the contrary. But yeah. What John's pointing out is that we've had outside external parties running up our legal tab.
Yeah, let me just respond to that though. And first of all, you guys can criticize me all you want. My skin is thick and I can handle it. But we do get contacted a lot. I do get contacted, and I try in all instances to redirect that contact to our single point of contact, which is the airport manager. But sometimes that doesn't work, or sometimes the contact is a threatening of legal action where I need to be involved at the front end anyway. And then we have the issues, as the chairman mentioned, where we get something and it's messed up. And, one thing you can do is you can certainly just reject it and say, it's screwed up, give it back to you. We generally try and take the approach, as staff, that if there's something that's wrong, we try to tell them what's wrong. And to some extent, we try to help them to fix it. Unfortunately, some people really take advantage of that. And sometimes I get the idea that people slop stuff together and throw it at us just so that they can find out from us how they need to fix everything. And that ends up costing a lot of time. And then we have the other issue, which is we're very anxious to get a project going on the airport. So we stick ourselves out even further because we want to make this thing happen, and it keeps changing. And so, 1 week we're looking at it this way and trying to figure out, okay, does it comply with the requirements? And then the next week it's changed to something else. And so there are a lot of problems there, but I think you nailed it on the core problem. The thing has to be complete before it gets to us, because if it's not complete, then we're running around like crazy.
Stan, I'm going to address that at the end of the meeting today, okay? But I think the other thing that I'm going to put on as an agenda, yeah, I have the microphone on. I think, John, because you did make me aware of this a couple weeks ago. And I think what we're going to do is maybe next meeting, maybe September, when we have some time to kick the can around on the concept, come up with a cost recovery policy on this. And it's not just legal fees, it's professional fees in general. We have a outstanding invoice that we've billed a prospective tenant who didn't pursue their lease with us, yet they owe us for the appraisal. We're out the money on the appraisal. They owe us the money for the appraisal. They haven't paid us. We have to come up with a policy that sets forth procedures on us billing these parties for cost recovery, no matter what the outcome is. If they engage our legal counsel beyond a certain point, we have to recover the funds. Spending $23,000 on legal bills for a lease that never comes to fruition is inordinate, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're a board, and we have a manager who thinks like an entrepreneur, right? And an entrepreneur, and our legal counsel. I mean, and we live in Carson City. I mean, everything here happens pretty casually, and it's and very we're solicitous of potential tenants, as we should be. Particularly, our manager should be solicitous. But as our counsel so correctly pointed out, sometimes people see that and they take advantage of it. And I think it would make sense for us to try to write a policy that, identifies when somebody has crossed the line and hasn't done their due diligence before they start spending our money. I mean, it's going to be a tough policy to write, but probably worth writing.
Okay, does anyone have any comments or questions for John about what he has presented here?
It was earmarked to offset general labor expenses. It helped pay our payroll.
Okay, John, thanks for letting me put you on the spot and taking you out of order. Corey, I understand that our engineer is not with us this evening, so we have an engineer's report in writing in our board packet, and really nothing has changed since our last meeting. Is that correct?
That's correct. And they just made one comment. If anybody has any questions, please let me know, and I will get those questions to them and get you the answers.
Okay. Anyone have any questions they'd like to direct through Corey to our engineer? Okay. Fair enough. We don't have a consent agenda, so we are going to move on to public hearings. Item H1 for discussion and possible action. Approve a lease amendment to Mentors Unlimited Incorporated, executing a lease extension for a period of an additional 10 years and at the current market rate. I'm going to turn this over to our legal counsel, Steve Takis. Before I do so, I need to disclose a financial interest that is not in this matter, but with a person who is a party to the applicant. Mrs. Weaver, who's sitting out here this evening, is a minority business partner with me in a completely different venture, not related to the Mentors Unlimited lease in any way, shape, or form. I have no interest in that lease. I have no economic gain in that lease to be had or economic loss for that matter. Um, so I don't have a conflict of interest, but in the big scheme of things, we want to keep everything above board. I want to disclose that, and it would be in my best interest to abstain from voting on this. I don't want there to seem as if there's any impropriety, so I'm going to abstain on the vote. I may opine on the matter, but I will not be voting on it. With that, Mr. Takis?
Okay, so this item, Steve Takis, Airport Council, this item is an amendment to the Mentors Unlimited lease. Most of you know them as Weaver Aircraft because it's been Neil and Yvonne Weaver for the last, a very long time. In one of the earlier amendments to the airport that was approved by the city and the Airport Authority, I think it was the Airport Authority existed back then, yeah. There was a provision included in the airport, in the lease, and this is the only lease that has it, that allows the lease to be extended for 10 years. And it's that provision that the tenant has approached us and asked, can we go ahead and exercise that option for a 10-year extension? And the provision basically says you can extend it for 10 years upon agreement with the authority. And so the discussions that we had with Mentors Unlimited were that just like other leases, well, this is an FBO lease, but just like aircraft storage leases, if we extend it, it has to be at the current appraised price. That's a statutory requirement for those leases. And so we used the last approved appraised price for FBOs, and it was actually the price that was used on the Gonai Aviation lease, which is also an FBO lease that does not have external access, directly to the roads outside. And so we applied that lease rate. And so what you have before you is an amendment, and all the amendment does is extend their lease for 10 years. All the terms, everything else stays the same, except that their rental rate goes up to the current appraised value. My own 2 cents is this is a very fair and efficient way to deal with it. Yes, the Airport Authority could simply say, no, we're not agreeing to it. We're going to let this lease run out. That's really not, the airport manager and I believe that's really not in the best interests of the airport. It's much better to keep the tenant in there. They're working on aircraft, they're providing service to the community, and they're providing revenue to the Airport Authority. And so Mrs. Weaver and her counsel are here in case there are any questions that you have that I can't answer. But the short version is it's a short amendment, and staff recommends that you approve it.
Thank you, Steve. Starting with Paul, down at the right end of the table here. Any questions, comments?
No questions, comments.
Stan? Tim?
No questions or comments.
Harlow?
No.
I'm fine.
Okay, I guess I'm going to ask a question. Am I to understand that the annual rent will be $5,922? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And what is the current rent?
I don't know.
Okay.
I have that
I-
information in my file someplace. I didn't bring it with me.
Okay. I'm sure I can figure that out.
it's
It's less than half of this amount.
Yeah,
though.
it's substantially less because this was an older lease that
Right.
was leased originally for just a couple of cents a square foot.
Right.
And that was fair because back then that was the market rate.
Right. And I'm just looking at it. Current rent is 12 cents per square foot, going to 28 cents. So it's more than doubling. And I was just trying to
Yes.
put it into perspective for the Airport Authority to understand that we're more than doubling the rent on this. And so we're currently getting probably about $2,400 on ballparking. It goes to $5,900. And we get the CPI increase on the greater amount. So,
That's correct.
okay, just point of clarification.
When does the change in lease start?
The change in lease occurs when the Board of Supervisors approves it because that's the secondary approval that needs to occur. And so assuming this board approves it, either the airport manager or I will put it before the Board of Supervisors. And then once we get their approval and sign off, then it would start on the next month following that approval.
Steve, would that be the new rent would start then?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay, when does the lease expire?
The lease was set to expire,
Okay,
well,
I see, May 23rd?
yeah.
Okay.
May 23rd of, well, actually, it was scheduled to expire on December 8th of 2024. So that's when it's set to expire. And
So by, and again, point of clarification
yeah.
only, by extending early,
yeah,
because it expires, that's what I thought, I didn't think it
Right.
was already expired.
no,
By
it's-
extending 2.5 years early, basically,
yeah,
for an additional 10 years,
right.
the airport's getting an increase in rent today
Correct.
that we wouldn't otherwise see.
That's correct. And that is exactly the same way we've treated all of the other extensions of leases. And so we're being consistent there.
Okay.
That was, your question is an excellent question. That question was asked by Mrs. Weaver's counsel, and she made the same argument, which is a good argument. Wait, shouldn't the rent just start when we get to the renewal period? And that's not the way that we have historically done that.
Okay.
There,
Is that what we did with Gonai Aviation?
yes,
Okay. Then that's what we do.
it's.
I'm just saying, point of clarification. Sounds to me like a decent deal for the airport, especially for the next 30 months when we wouldn't see that additional revenue.
Well, even though I would like for Mentors Unlimited benefit to do it differently, because I want to be nice to them. I think we all want to be nice. That isn't the way we've done it. And to be fair, they're getting something of value right now, which if they waited until December of 2024, they may not get approval for an extension.
Understood.
At that point, the conditions have changed, and the airport authority might say, well, at this point, it's not in our best interest to extend it. It's our best interest to take over the building. And so from that standpoint, I think it's a smart move on behalf of Mentors Unlimited. And we've seen other people who recognize that as well. George Byard did when we extended his. The John Mays, the Correos, when they extended theirs. Now, one thing I should point out is that ability to extend leases still exists, but it only exists for aircraft storage only hangars. FBO hangars, they no longer have that statutory right. So when I say this is the only lease that has it built in, that's the only reason that Mentors Unlimited can do that with this lease, which is some great foresight by the tenant back in 1994 or whenever they did the amendment that gave them the additional 10 years. Back then, you could do it. You could extend FBO leases. Now the statute doesn't allow us. Well, the statute allows us to extend FBO leases, but you can only extend them for a maximum of 5 years. Example is the Shade Tree lease, which, as you all know, is going to expire this next month, and that building is going to revert to us.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions, comments? If not, I think we should, please do.
Move to approve the lease amendment to Mentors Unlimited, Inc., executing a lease extension for a period of additional 10 years and at the current market rate of 28 cents.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the amendment to the Mentors Unlimited lease, extending the term by 10 years and updating the rate to the current market rate of 28 cents a foot upon full execution of the lease. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And for the record, Danielle, I abstain. Thank you. Thanks, Yvonne. Talk to you later. As I said, item number 2 has been removed from the agenda. Item number 3, Corey had requested we put this on the agenda for discussion and possible action to amend the airport gate card policy. Corey, take it away, sir.
Okay, so for starters, this is Corey, airport manager. It is a common topic in airport operations with airport users about airport security and gate card access. A lot of airport users view this as an inconvenience, while they do understand the importance of it for airport security. My goal with this agenda item is to make the gate card access system less burdensome for the airport users while also increasing airport security. My proposed items to be changed in the current gate card policy is that renewal would no longer take place annually, but every 4 years. Airport turnover for hangar owners or tie-down customers is not all that often. The amount of information that's going to change on an annual basis is very little, but that is a process that requires every single airport user to go through an administrative process, regardless of whether or not anything has changed. That is definitely a burden for the airport user, and it's excessive in my opinion. Also, the next item that would change, in order to address the 1 year period, we can have the cards automatically expire if they're unused for a year. So if someone has an access card, but they are not in fact using it, and it's just sitting in a drawer, that could be potentially stolen. It could be loaned out to somebody and the wrong person ends up with it. If it's not being used, it gets turned off after a year. If that person comes back to the airport and tries to access the airport, they come by the airport manager's office and we address it. And if they are if they are a justified user of the airport, it would be reactivated. Tenants, so hangar owners and tie-down tenants don't turn over that often, but there are people who have airport access who are not hangar tenants or tie-down customers. This can be employees of different companies at the airport. It could also potentially be individuals who are working on projects on a temporary basis. These cards would have an automatic expiration period after 2 years, since they are not necessarily going to be coming back to the airport, like the hangar owners will be, who are going to be probably tenants at the airport for a very long time. Also, I think that it's important to add a warranty into the gate card policy. These cards, while they're very expensive, if one of these cards just stops working because of a defect, I don't think that the airport user or the tenant should be held liable for paying a replacement fee for that. But after a 1 year period, if they cause damage to that card or if it fails, then they should have to pay the replacement fee of $25. The replacement charge is not new, that's the existing fee. Also, gate cards should be in the name of the card holder. So right now, there are a lot of cards out there on the airport who are in one person's name. There are some individuals who have a large number of cards. They had some sort of justification for getting multiple cards. I'm sure it was legitimate. But there have been 3 different occasions since I've been hired where someone has ended up on the runway. And then whenever we look into this to try to figure out who that individual is, each instance they've been using someone else's card with somebody else's name on it. That's an airport security problem. We need to be able to identify who is actually accessing the airport. We can still accommodate the needs of these users who have multiple cards by giving them the ability to have authorized users. If they are a tenant and they want to authorize someone to use their hangar, they can absolutely still do that. They can sign off on the application, and then the authorized user would get a card in their name. Now we have the tenants, they're still able to get additional cards if they need them, but the airport is more secure because the airport is actually aware of who is coming and going, and we're able to also identify those individuals and have them present identification at time of getting those cards, so we know who has access to the airport. And that is the extent of the changes, and that's all that I have on that topic. Actually, there's one more thing I'd like to add. There are other measures in place for updating contact information for airport users. For example, most of our ground leases encompass multiple hangars, and whenever there is a change of tenant, we are supposed to get a notification from the ground lease holder of the change. Um, and they're also supposed to submit that data annually. So we can definitely use what they're submitting to update this contact information without it being a burden to the airport user to have to go through this annual update process. So that's all I have on this topic, and I'm available for questions.
Harlow, anything? John?
I was surprised by the difference between, it's a 1-year period when a inactive card gets removed from the system, but 2 years for the contractors that are only going to probably be on site for a few months. I was curious as to why the difference in expiration time for those two occurrences.
It's a great point, and I think that we could definitely subdivide that down to 1 year for contractors, but the category of non-airport tenants includes more than just contractors coming out to the airport to do work. Employees are a big category of that. So employees of FBOs, they don't have huge turnover, but there is turnover there, and that 2-year period would catch that turnover and prevent old employees from having active cards out there. And there are even more scenarios where people that are not a tenant would have a badge. Anyone who has received authorization, it could be a consultant for the airport, someone who has a 5-year contract with the airport for consulting purposes. They would have access to the airport. They would be required to renew after 2 years because they're a company, they have turnover. Their employees may no longer be working there. That would catch those. But I'm open to additional suggestions, and I would definitely encourage the board to make some suggestions. And we could definitely do contractors doing work on a job that's almost always going to be less than a year. I would absolutely be open to restricting that to a 1-year period.
Tim, do you have anything to add to the discussion?
I spoke with Corey about this and support his action. I think that it's appropriate the way it's being handled. Sitting in that chair for a while, realizing how many cards were out there that we had no idea what's going on with these people for years and years. He came up with a good solution. And the 1 year or 2 year on contractors is not, to me, important enough to change. So I support it.
Okay, Stan?
I don't have that number. There are probably a lot more active cards right now than there are hangers and tie downs. And I don't have that total number for you.
So if I'm a contractor and I have a 9-month job, I can keep those cards for a year before you request them back?
They're going to be required to turn them in at the end of the job. But
Not now, right?
they would be required for that now too.
Okay.
But the problem is when they don't. If there is a card that is left out there and they're on a 9-month job, it will be canceled after 1 year if we decide to do 1 year for the contractor. The expiration date, the primary use of it is to catch those cards that are not canceled. There will be turnover in hangars where there's a sublease that the airport doesn't even know about it, and that tenant is no longer a tenant of the airport. The airport doesn't know that.
So is this an administrative workload, a lot of workload for you?
As of right now, every airport user is required to update their contact information with the airport administration office annually by a specific date. So in that scenario, that is a significant workload for airport administration. By having it expire after a 4-year period on the anniversary of the card, it would be spread out over the year, and it wouldn't be nearly as often because it's every 4 years instead of annually.
You don't feel like it diminishes security in any way?
No, I don't. The turnover is too low for it to diminish security, in my opinion. There will be some turnover during that time, but we should be catching that through the reports from the ground lease holders, and also that's what the expiration date staying in place would catch. And I think a big part of that is enforcing the reporting from the ground lease holders and making sure we're actually getting that information. That burden is on the ground lease holders and less of a burden on the airport users to increase the customer satisfaction.
Thank you.
Paul?
Most of the problems I've seen here at the airport for security have been based on the cards, and it looks like this is going to help take care of a lot of that. So I support everything on here.
Yeah, John?
Do we have a system in place, Corey, where we ping, nobody's going to remember after 4 years that they're supposed to re-up their cards. So do we have the ability to ping them and say, hey, it's time?
That's a great question, and that is something that I need to implement. I had that in place at my previous airport with using an automated system that I designed. I will put something together to accomplish that as a part of this.
The fact that I sat in that chair and I implemented the new software, there is a expiration option on each individual user. You can go into the card and I left them open at the time, hoping that we get a manager who can figure all this out later. So you can go in and actually put the expiration dates and it'll automatically pop up. So
Don't think it sends them a notice right now.
no, it doesn't send them a notice, but let you know when they're,
Yeah.
and we could export a list and send out notices. So yeah, it's not one and done, but it's still easy to track.
Yeah, I will come up with a solution for that because I agree with you. That's important.
Okay. Yes, Steve?
I just wanted to respond to Supervisor Jones' question. I know the number of cards is greater than 600 because we replaced the system because we capped out at 600 and we didn't have any more cards to give out. And so even though we've pulled some back in, given new ones out, I suspect the numbers is probably significantly more than 600.
Harlow, did I skip you? I'm sorry. No, I didn't think so. I wouldn't forget Harlow. I thought I got him at the very beginning. I defer to Corey on this. I talked to him about it. He feels it's better administratively. I put my faith in what he's doing, so I'm good with it.
Well, I struggle with that comment. Administratively, we have to eat. If we have to do it administratively, we got to do it. I'm not too happy with this personally.
With the change?
Right. I think security is very important at this airport. And I just think you're weakening the program. But that's my thoughts.
I'm curious, Stan, what do you think weakens it? Because I don't know. We beat this to a pulp about 4 years ago on the Airport Authority. And so Corey is proposing some revisions. The biggest one that I see is instead of confirming contact information annually, it's every 4 years. Okay. I had suggested to Corey, and he did put it in here, that all unused gate access cards expire if they haven't been used for a year. That was kind of the countermeasure. In other words, Corey will literally they'll deactivate after 12 months. So to me, I had said to Corey, I was concerned about the 4 years too. And I said, well, wait a second. What if they don't use the card for a period of time, can we deactivate the card? And he said, yes. I said, good, because if the card's legitimate and if the card holder is legitimate and the card gets deactivated after 12 months, that'll bring them into Corey's office.
I want to support this too, Stan. The software is amazing. You can literally go in and you can see who's coming in the gates, who they are, get a picture of them. It's really very good. And I was concerned, 4 years is a long time too, but when he talked about the 1 year expiration, that more than answers my concerns about keeping it current, because boom, people, cards that have just been out there, they're dead now. And that really makes me feel better. They have to come in the office and ask to have it renewed. And that is our,
If it hasn't been used.
if it hasn't been used, and that's a really good. And the other thing he's doing that I like a lot is that we have some of our tenants that have large hangar operations, and they have 10, 12, 14 cards out for their staff and blah, blah, blah. And a lot of them just say the name of the tenant, not the user. And that's another way of him improving our security by getting more specific on that. And that was two good areas to make us a much more secure airport.
I mean, we could, to address Stan's concern, change this from every 4 years to every 2. You wouldn't do it. Okay. Okay. What's the pleasure of the airport authority on it?
Can I make a motion?
Go for it, absolutely.
I move to approve the proposed changes to the gate access card policy as proposed by airport manager.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Paul seconds it. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the proposed changes to the Carson City Airport Authority gate card policy as set forth by our manager. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Corey, airport manager's report. You're the popular guy this evening.
Okay, so this is Corey, airport manager. We had a significant increase in fuel sales over last year. This is the biggest increase that we've seen yet this year. It's mostly been a decrease. I think this is because of the wildfires last year. There was probably really low numbers last year contributing to that, but these numbers are pretty significantly higher month over month over the previous months this year so far. So people are flying more, which is great. We did have a sheriff response at the airport. So that was just a few days ago on the 15th, around 7 p.m. I received a call from a distraught young man who thought his sister was being kidnapped at the airport. I contacted the sheriff's department immediately. I met with the sheriff's deputies, and we searched the area. I made sure to assist them every way I could, and we didn't find anything at the airport. Ended up getting a call back from them, and they located her. It was off airport, and she was safe. So I spent some time with the sheriff's deputies working on that, and had a good outcome. I've had a lot of communication with multiple developers interested in building aircraft storage hangars. There's a lot of demand out there, and they are all working to put together proposals. And I'll continue to work with them to try to get some good proposals for the airport. We received a notice from the FAA that our grant application for terminal funding has been declined. That was not entirely unexpected since we're not a commercial airport, and commercial airports were given priority in that competitive process. Now, the good news is that we are going to be able to apply for that same grant funding annually until 2026. So I will work to improve that application each year and try to give us a better and better position. Hopefully those commercial operators get the funding that they need, and then the FAA is able to consider our application. At the request of one of those potential developers that's interested in building storage hangars at the airport, I worked with the Public Works Department to determine if there was a sewer line that enters into the triangle that was not showing up on any maps that the city had, any utility maps. But it technically should have been a part of a previous project. Public Works was really cooperative, and they were excited to help. And they came out and they brought one of their trucks to clear out sewer lines and also to run a camera down sewer lines. They were able to determine that that sewer line is in fact there, and it was put in. It goes from near the run-up pad of Alpha, under the runway, across Delta, and into the triangle. So any potential developers, that is going to be a significant cost saving for them in the triangle for hangar development. That was a really good find, and Public Works did all of the measurements, and they took all of the data they needed to get it on the city's maps. It could potentially be a benefit to the city that that line is there. It is an 8-inch line, which means that the capacity is very significant, and it could support far more than just our hangar development. It could potentially support a lot of the development north of our airport. So not only is it good for the airport and the potential developers, it's actually really good for the city if they need to utilize it to bypass any deteriorating infrastructure that exists north of the airport. The city could potentially tie into it. I've received a noticeable increase in aircraft noise complaints. I've been working with Paul Hamilton to address each of these complaints and to develop a noise complaint form to better track these complaints so we can address them better over time. The increase in complaints right now is definitely one of the major factors is density altitude at the airport. The increased temperatures are making it more difficult for these aircraft to gain altitude at the same rates they normally can. And they are ending up at lower altitudes than they normally would. I'm addressing this by contacting these pilots and asking them to carry less weight if possible, and also to fly a pattern that is more conducive to reaching pattern altitude as quickly as they can and best in line with FAA regulations. And this noise complaint form will also make it to where we can track where we're getting the complaints from over time. So we can do some geomapping to identify what areas are being impacted, when and how, and we can directly address these issues. The FAA did a site visit. The Phoenix ADO has some new staff, so they wanted the staff to see the airport and also for the airport to meet the new staff at the ADO. That was a really good experience. We don't always get to have the one-on-one interactions with the FAA representatives in that way. So it was very good to meet them. And they were happy to see the airport. They were really happy to see how our pavement is holding up. The history of this airport's pavement rehabilitation definitely shows with our pavement, and the FAA definitely noticed that. So that was a great compliment from the FAA. Rick Lee and I attended a conference for NVPERS. We attended this for training on a new system for reporting for employers. Rick Lee and I are both trained on that process, and we'll both be involved with ensuring it's done properly with the new system that they're implementing. That will hopefully streamline that. NVPERS is operating what seems like on typewriters, and they actually are using the same system that they used when they were using typewriters. We're submitting data in a format that is used we're using Excel to do it now, but it's in the same format that was submitted on type before computers, and they're finally upgrading that. So that'll be a big improvement for everybody involved. received a letter of acceptance from the state for our final budget. And the Board of Supervisors accepted our ASIP and also all potential grant awards included in the ASIP. Aircraft operations were about average, a little bit above average according to our ADSB data, and those charts are attached below. I also have an additional attachment here. This was put together by Rick Lee. We did have two security trespassing incidents at the airport in fairly close time period. We started reacting to it immediately following the first incident, June 7th. We identified some areas of improvement with our personnel gates, and Rick has implemented solutions. These are solutions that he fabricated and implemented himself. We identified that the combinations hadn't been changed in a very long time, so we did change the combinations right away. The gates were accessible to somebody with knowledge of how to pick a lock. If you had a screwdriver or a knife, you could gain access to the airport. Rick developed a solution that completely eliminates that security hole. He also replaced the operator on those gates, or on one of them so far. He'll be doing the same on the other gates that need it. It's important for these gates to close with enough force to shut, but also with not too much force that it causes the latch to fail to latch. If those devices begin to fail, they will actually begin to shut too hard, and the gate will bounce back, not actually latching. He identified that risk and he implemented a solution, and now that gate is closing perfectly well, and he will be implementing that on the other gates that need it. I wanted to highlight that because that was a pretty big security vulnerability, and Rick did a fantastic job of putting together a solution for us. And that is all that I have.
Any questions for Corey from the members of the Airport Authority? John?
Just for my education on the noise complaint front, you know, when airplanes leave the airport heading west, are they encouraged, or is it a standard flight path to fly down Carson Street as opposed to over the neighborhoods and to the west of Carson Street?
So the airport has previously put together a really good noise abatement, voluntary noise abatement program, and it's published on our website. When they're departing from the airport, it goes over commercial developments instead of residential developments. There is also a standard traffic pattern for all airports that's established by the FAA, and we have some input into that, and we can make some changes, minor changes to that, and it is implemented in a way that encourages aircraft to not be directly over residential areas. And there are so many factors that go into that, and weather is definitely the biggest one. Which direction the winds are coming from, how fast the winds are blowing, and the density altitude. Density altitude is a big deal. You know, some of these aircraft don't have super great performance, and we're a high elevation airport. So whenever there are density altitude impacts, we really feel it. And that can be addressed in some ways, and reducing weight, encouraging pilots to not overload their aircraft more than necessary. These are things that I will continue to do to try to hopefully address that.
Okay, thanks, John. Anybody else? Okay, thanks, Corey. Steve, any report from you that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, just two quick things. One is on the noise complaints. Historically, we get more complaints in the summer, and I think Corey has nailed it. Part of it is the altitude density, the warm temperature, the fact that airplanes have to work harder, so they're noisier to climb up. The other reason is because people don't have all their windows and doors shut, which they do in the winter. And so we get that. Particularly complaints from the west side of Carson City, those really only happen in the summer. And usually it's someone who's just particularly sensitive or their hearing is really attuned to that frequency band, and it drives them kind of crazy. We had a deputy DA years ago who lived over there who called me at least once a week every summer to complain about it and claiming that the airplanes were 50 feet above her house. And of course, I could see they were well over 1,000 feet over her house by the time they got to her house, but it happens. The one thing I did want to report on from a legal standpoint is a discussion I had with our treasurer, John Rogers, who does a great job of questioning expenses, which is a wonderful benefit to the airport authority. And one of the expenses he questioned is there was a payment made for the legal representation for Member Hamilton as a result of an ethics complaint. And I just wanted to report to you that when that first happened, I had a discussion with the chairman, and we together decided this is a legitimate expense to pay for the airport because the complaint that came in really was broader than just Mr. Hamilton, and it was really geared at trying to undercut pretty much everything that you guys do as airport authority members. And so we had the discussion. The amount was less than $5,000, and which, by the way, is historically the threshold that the airport uses. Clearly, we don't want to bring every purchase of paper clips and anything else to the airport authority for action. On the flip side, anything big really needs to have your input and your approval. You have to draw a line someplace, and historically, we've drawn the line at $5,000. If the expense is less than $5,000, the chairman can go ahead and authorize it. And that was the case there, and so I recommended that they go ahead and authorize it. And I think that's what the sum of it was. And I don't know if, Member Rogers, if there's anything you want to add. But I wanted to report that to you so at least you were aware of it. And Mr. Rogers can move on probably to other expenses that catch his eye.
There was one other caveat to that matter, which was we did not want to have that, because it was potential litigation, we did not want to have that conversation about this particular matter in open session. And so we took that into consideration with the dollar amount and the circumstances and said, just pay it and move on.
My job here is to just make sure that we keep everything above board and we follow our own procedures. And so that's all I was trying to accomplish, and I think we've done so.
Steve and John, we already heard from you, so we're going to skip over item number K. Any reports from airport authority members? Anyone? Okay, I have a report, and I'd like everyone to pay very close attention to what I am saying, because we have got to make a procedural change to the way we agendize our meetings, the way we handle the agenda. The airport authority bylaws give the chairman of the airport authority the sole discretion to set the agenda. It's the chairman's responsibility to place items on the agenda. Now, the chairman really doesn't do that. The chairman relies on the airport manager, and the airport manager and the chairman have a discussion, and sometimes the vice chair is involved. And, we have a draft agenda, we review it, and typically before the agenda is published, there have been a few parties that review it. We have had a litany of problems when it comes to putting items on the agenda that do not belong. We had an agenda item this evening that I pulled from the agenda. I made the determination yesterday that item would not be heard under any circumstances. The applicant refused to provide us with the information required in accordance with Carson City Municipal Code, Title 19. In some cases, this particular applicant wanted to write their own rules, and we just can't have that. It's not a matter of negotiation. The other problem we've had, and we've had a couple of these, is that we don't receive this information in a timely manner. The Board of Supervisors requires that the information be received 2 weeks before the meeting in order for it to be placed on the agenda. All information. We have had applicants come to us under the wire. We've had applicants come to us after the agenda has been approved. We've told them there's a deadline. We've told them we're publishing the agenda on this date, and they act as if they write the rules, and they don't. And so, from this point forward, and I want to make this painfully clear to everybody on this airport authority, any matter going on the agenda must be identified 2 weeks before the meeting date, just like the Board of Supervisors. All supporting documentation that would be required for that agenda item to be placed on the agenda must be received and reviewed by the airport manager and the chairman of the airport authority. And at that point, it would give us time to have legal counsel and other professional services review the supporting documentation if required. We can't be handed supporting documentation hours before a meeting. And further, to address Stan's concern, and a legitimate one at that, mind you, about the costs being driven on these matters to our legal account. What has been happening is we have had applicants that don't necessarily like what they're hearing from Corey, and they go right to our legal counsel. And they go to our legal counsel and submit information that doesn't pass muster. And it can't be placed on the agenda for one reason or another. It's either incomplete or incorrect. And they use our legal counsel as a means to clean up their own agenda, if you will, or their own packet of information that we require. So going forward, let me reiterate, anytime we have a matter on the agenda, it has to be identified 2 weeks before our meeting date, and all supporting documentation must be received by the airport manager and the airport chair at that 2-week time frame. And if it's not received, it doesn't go on the agenda. End of discussion. If anyone has any questions or comments, you can contact me or approach me after the meeting, but we need to clean this up as a matter of proper administration and proper efficiency and also cost mitigation. So, yes, Steve.
I just wanted to say, I would really appreciate it if you implemented a policy like that, because I do get those phone calls, and I do get the emails, and I do get the documents. And it would be much more efficient and cheaper for the airport authority if the applicants would give the stuff to Corey. When Corey decides he's got something complete enough to send to me, sends it to me. I do the legal review, send it back to him. He remains a single point of contact, so we aren't getting all these calls. And if there's a strictly legal issue, fine, he can throw me in there and I'll deal with them directly. But the last 3 days, there's no way I can dedicate the amount of time that item number 2 was requiring and still practice law. I try to make myself available to the airport authority, but I also try and minimize my time and my billing to the airport authority, which means that I have a pretty full schedule of other clientele and other legal stuff. Most of it's estate planning. And the last 3 days have been horrendous for me. In hearing in Ely on Monday, and I got to experience the high density altitude of trying to take off in Ely midday. Huge runway, beautiful area, no houses. But boy, that airplane was slow getting up above the copper mine and looking down, seeing the workers pretty close as I went over. But I have had a horrendous week, and I can't set aside the time to do this last minute. It's got to come in a timely basis so that we can work together, we can get it done. And to the extent something's deficient, we can tell them in time to correct it, as opposed to we're doing this back and forth right up to the day of the meeting. And so
and this
I would
is-
encourage that.
Yeah, and this is not something that's a board policy. It's really a matter for the chairman of the airport authority to implement, because it's the chairman that sets the agenda. There will be a subsequent chairman. They want to change that rule, let them change that rule. But this is a matter of efficiency, cost mitigation, and our counsel points out correctly so, his involvement is legal practice, not business practice. And this is one of the problems we have. We tell applicants that, hey, you need to provide this. It's in the municipal code. And they tell us, well, we don't want to provide that. We say, look, it's not open for negotiation, just provide it. And then they go right to our counsel, who, in all sincereness, is open to discussion, to be accommodating. That's his job. But it's gotten out of control.
And the other part of that is Corey needs to be in the loop too.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, he needs to know what's.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
The supporting documentation for any matter on the agenda must be received by the airport manager and submitted to the chairman of the airport authority 2 weeks prior to the meeting date. Yeah, Paul.
So this is a municipal code. This is not a new.
Well, no. It's not a municipal code.
Okay. Then we probably should somehow get something in writing so that
I'll put it in writing.
so that we have a simple
Yeah.
way of dealing with it. So
Yeah, well, it's really nothing for the airport authority to deal with. It's setting the agenda of the meeting. In order to set the agenda, we need the supporting documentation. If we don't get the supporting documentation,
No.
we can't put the item on the
No,
agenda.
I know all that, but it would be nice if Corey had a little piece of paper or something.
We'll give it to him.
This is our policy. And
Yeah, we'll
this-
give it to him, and
This is the way it's got to be.
we've already talked about it. Myself, Corey, our counsel have all weighed in on this matter, and we want to be consistent. In addition to being accommodating, we want to be consistent and efficient in the way we operate, and it's really unfair to everyone sitting here today to have an applicant expect that we're going to trip over ourselves at 5:15 on a Thursday when the agenda's been approved and it's been submitted and published, and it has to be official Friday morning. We got to put an end to it, bottom line. So we're going to do that.
I'd be happy to sign that instruction letter to our manager because
Oh, good.
I actually would like it to be possible for our manager to review the financials that come out and how are part of the board packet, in a way where we can deal with the I dotting and T crossing that almost always happens every month, without him being completely overwhelmed with last
And
minute panic
that's
stuff.
the problem. We shouldn't
Yep.
be dealing with fire drills. I'm going to prevent that from here on out.
Great.
So that's my report from this airport authority member. We got to go to public comment. Any public comment? Anyone want to opine? Well, I think I can't address we can't discuss back and forth. We can only accept your comment. I will say that you're on the right track. Yeah, something. Yeah. Again, we can't go back and forth with you, but we appreciate your comment. Yep. Okay, Corey, do you want to outline for us any agenda items you think may be on the next agenda? Anything to look forward to?
I think that, I made a comment earlier about potential developers. Hopefully, we will start to see some of that. There will probably be a bid process for a hangar whose lease is expiring in August. I'm not sure if that'll be in the next board meeting or not, but that's definitely coming.
Oh, yeah.
And this is going to be development. That we'll probably see item number 2 come back whenever the proposal is properly prepared. And so we'll see some FBO development and potential bidding for existing hangar.
Okay. Fair enough. Yes, John.
I personally am disappointed that we didn't get the FAA money to do the terminal work. And so our plan seems to be currently, wait a year and see if we get, we percolate up to the top of the list. And of course, it might be 2, 3, 4 years. So at some point in time, I'd like to think that we might want to consider a contingency plan, an RFP, to do a private development that causes the terminal building to be upgraded. I'm not proposing that to happen prior to the next meeting, but I'm thinking that might be a parallel approach. Wait, but also have a contingency plan. I think would be useful.
Thank you so much. Okay. On that note, we're adjourned.